The night my sister called me, I was elbow deep in a transmission on a 9A1950, grease up to my forearms, country music playing low on the shop radio. It was just past 9. I almost didn't pick up. Soft. Her voice came out wrong. Too small. Like something had been squeezed out of it. I set down the wrench. "Hey! What's wrong?" She didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing. Fast and shallow, like she was trying to hold something together that kept wanting to come apart. "I need you to come get me." I was already reaching for a rag to wipe my hands. "Where are you?" "The library parking lot, on campus." "I'm 20 minutes out, stay on the phone with me." She didn't stay on the phone. She hung up. I drove anyway. My sister Serena is 3 years younger than me. She's the one who made it out of our hometown the right way. Scholarship, straight A's, full ride to Caldwell University, pre-law. Our mom worked doubles at the hospital laundry for 12 years so that one of us would have the kind of options she never got. When Serena got that acceptance letter, Mom framed it. It's still on the wall in the kitchen. I didn't finish college. I went 2 years, ran out of money, came home, and started working at my uncle's auto shop. I don't say that with bitterness. I'm good at what I do. But Serena was supposed to be the one. When I pulled into the Caldwell Library parking lot that Friday night, she was sitting on the curb near the back entrance, arms wrapped around her knees. The lot was mostly empty. One of the overhead lights was out, leaving a long stretch of shadow near where she sat. I didn't even put the truck in park all the way before I got out. She looked up when she heard me, and I saw her face in the light from the building. And I knew. I didn't know exactly what had happened yet, but I knew something had been taken from her that she hadn't agreed to give. I sat down on the curb next to her. I didn't say anything for a minute. I just sat there. "It was Whitmore's son," she finally said. "Garrett." Senator Dale Whitmore represented our state. He'd been in office 12 years. His face was on billboards. His son Garrett was a junior at Caldwell, business major, lacrosse player, the kind of guy who walked into rooms like the room had been waiting for him. Serena told me what happened in pieces, quietly, staring at the ground. There'd been a party at an off-campus house. She'd gone with her study group. She'd had one drink. Someone had put something in it. She remembered parts of it and didn't remember others, and the parts she remembered she told me. And I sat very still and listened to all of it, and I kept my voice level, because she needed me level right then. When she was done, we sat in the quiet for another minute. "Did you tell anyone yet?" She shook her head. "I called you first." "Okay." I stood up and held out my hand. "We're going to the hospital, not the one on campus. We're going to Mercy General." She looked up at me. "Why Mercy?" "Because it's not on campus. Because I need them to do a kit. Because we're doing this right." She took my hand and I pulled her up, and we drove 30 minutes to Mercy General in the next county, and I sat in that waiting room for 4 hours while they processed everything, and I didn't look at my phone, and I didn't call anyone, and I just waited. The campus police officer who took her statement 3 days later, after she'd agreed to file one, his name was Greer. Late 40s, slight gut, a manner that suggested he'd been doing this long enough to have opinions about it. He sat across from Serena in a small room that smelled like burnt coffee, and I sat next to her because she'd asked me to come. He listened. He wrote things down. Then he asked her whether she was sure she hadn't misread the situation. I felt something move through me that I'd felt before. Years ago, 2 tours worth of it, in places I don't talk about at the shop. I breathed through it. Serena said she was sure. He said that Garrett Whitmore had already provided a statement, and that the statement was that the encounter had been consensual. I said she was drugged. The talk screen from Mercy General shows. He said, "I'm familiar with the report." Like it was an inconvenience. Like it was paperwork he'd already filed away. We walked out of that meeting with nothing except a case number and the officer's card, which Serena dropped in the first trash can she passed. I went home that night, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Mom was on a night shift. The house was quiet. The acceptance letter was on the wall. Here's the thing about me that very few people at the shop know. I was in the Army for 6 years. I did 2 tours, both in places that still live in me as weather rather than memory. I can tell when something's coming, I just can't always name what it is. When I got out, I came home, I went back to the shop, I kept my head down. Nobody in town knows what I did over there. I don't bring it up. I drive a truck with a dented bumper, and I'm good at transmissions, and that's mostly what people see. But I have a brother, older than me by 8 years. Our father's from a first marriage, So he grew up mostly in Virginia, and we didn't get close until I was in my 20s. His name is Raymond. Wait, I can't use that. His name is... His name is something I don't say out loud much, because he doesn't exist in ways most people can Google. What I can tell you is that he spent 22 years as a special agent with the FBI. The last 6 of those years, he ran a financial crimes task force out of Washington. When he retired from the bureau, he went into federal consulting, which means that on any given week, he might be on the phone with a U.S. attorney, a Senate Oversight Committee, or the IRS. He drives a sensible gray sedan. He has a house in Northern Virginia with a vegetable garden. He sounds, on the phone, like he is always the calmest person in the room. Because he always is. I called him that night at 11:30. He picked up on the second ring. "I figured you'd call," he said. He'd heard about Senator Whitmore's son before. I'd sent him a text the week it happened, just to keep him in the loop, not asking for anything yet. Tell me everything. Leave nothing out. I told him everything. He asked questions, specific, quiet questions that told me he was already thinking several moves ahead. He asked about the hospital kit, the chain of custody, the campus officer's name, the exact language Greer had used during the interview. He asked whether there were other women. I said I didn't know. He said he had a feeling there were. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to make some calls in the morning. Don't talk to campus administration yet. Don't talk to the senator's office. Don't talk to anyone." "What are you going to do?" "What I do," he said, and hung up. The following 10 days were the strangest of my life. Nothing looked different from the outside. I went to the shop. I changed oil and replaced brake pads and told a woman her catalytic converter was fine and she didn't need a new one, which made her so relieved she tipped me $20. I drove home. I ate dinner with Mom and didn't tell her yet, because Serena wasn't ready and it was Serena's story to tell. But underneath all of that, something was moving. I could feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives. My brother had a name for what he did: patient architecture. He once explained it to me like this: you don't tear down a corrupt structure from the outside. You go inside it first. You find every beam that's load-bearing. You document, you verify, you bring in the right people in the right order, and then, when everything is in position, you remove one beam, and the rest comes down on its own. What I didn't know during those 10 days was how much was already there. It turned out Garrett Whitmore had 2 prior complaints filed against him at Caldwell, both closed within weeks of being filed, both handled by the dean of students. A man named Pickett, who I would later learn, received a $40,000 donation to the university's athletic fund from Senator Whitmore's PAC in the year following each closure. It turned out the campus security office had a policy, undocumented but practiced, of routing any complaint involving a student from a donor family through Pickett's office first. It turned out Officer Greer had applied for a position with the senator's private security firm 8 months earlier. I learned all of this slowly, over those 10 days, through texts from my brother that read like briefings. No emotion, just facts and sequence. On the 11th day, he called. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the district is opening a federal investigation. Title IX violations, obstruction, and conspiracy to cover up a sexual assault. They've been looking for a pattern, and Serena's case gave them the thread they needed. There are 4 other women. I sat down. I was still in my work clothes. 4. At least, possibly more, who won't come forward. The U.S. Attorney is good. She doesn't lose. What about Garrett? He'll be arrested. The timing is the U.S. Attorney's call, not mine. And the senator? My brother paused. The senator is a separate matter. What his son did? That's criminal. What the senator did, calling in favors, pressuring the university, making Pickett's problem go away, that's also criminal. They're building both cases simultaneously. But Brett, he used my name in a way he almost never did. This is going to take time, and it's going to get loud. Serena needs to be prepared. She's tough. I know she's tough. That's not the same as being prepared. I told Serena that night. I drove to her campus apartment, and I sat at her little kitchen table with her, and I walked her through what I knew, and I watched her face while I talked. She sat very still. She had both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. When I finished, she said, "There are 4 others. At least." She looked at the table for a long time. Then she said, "I kept thinking I should have done something different. At the party. Before. During. I kept running it back. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that," she said. "I know it up here." She touched her temple. "But I keep running it back anyway." I didn't try to fix that. You can't fix that. You just sit with someone while they carry it. That's the only thing you can do. She looked up. Is he sure about all of this? I nodded. She was quiet again. Then 4 others. And they all stayed quiet because there was nowhere to go. Until now. She set down the mug. Something had shifted slightly in her face. Not hardness exactly, but resolution. The thing you find when you decide to stop running it back and start looking forward instead. Okay, she said. Tell me what I need to do. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks later. I was at the shop when my brother texted me 2 words, "It's done." Garrett Whitmore was taken into federal custody at 7:14 a.m. as he left the off-campus house he shared with 2 teammates. There were no cameras present by design. The U.S. attorney had specifically requested a low-profile arrest, no press circus, because she wanted the indictment to land before anyone had time to manage the story. Dean Pickett was served with a federal subpoena at his office at 8:02 a.m. Officer Greer was suspended pending investigation by 10 a.m. By noon, the university president had issued a statement that said very little but confirmed a great deal by what it omitted. Senator Whitmore held a press conference at 3 that afternoon. He stood in front of the Capitol building with 2 aides flanking him and said the allegations against his son were false and that the investigation was politically motivated. He looked like a man who was used to making problems go away and had just realized that this one had too many moving parts. I watched the press conference on my phone in the break room. Then I went back out and finished replacing a water pump on a Civic because the work doesn't stop. The trial took 8 months. I won't walk through all of it because some of it belongs to Serena and the other women and not to me. What I can tell you is that the U.S. attorney, her name was Forsyth, and she was 53 years old and had the demeanor of someone who had heard every excuse and was no longer interested in any of them, presented the case in a way that left very little air in the room. The evidence from Mercy General, the talk screen, the pattern across 5 women, the internal emails from Pickett's office, the phone records between Pickett and the senator's chief of staff. Garrett Whitmore was convicted on 3 counts. He was sentenced to 11 years. Pickett pled guilty to obstruction and was sentenced to 4 years, which felt inadequate, and also like the result of a cooperation agreement that got the prosecutors what they needed for the larger case. Officer Greer was terminated and is currently the subject of a separate civil lawsuit brought by 2 of the 5 women. Senator Whitmore was not criminally charged, yet. The investigation into his conduct is ongoing, and my brother, who speaks carefully, said when I asked him about it, federal investigations move at their own pace. But they move. He's not running for re-election. He made that announcement on a Friday afternoon in November, when news cycles are slow and people are starting their weekends, which is when you announce things you don't want anyone to pay attention to. The university settled the civil suit brought by all 5 women. The terms are confidential. What is not confidential is that Dean Pickett is gone, that the campus security department has been completely restructured under federal oversight, and that Colville University's Board of Trustees issued a 17-page report detailing the failures of the institution. I read all 17 pages. They were written in the careful language of institutional accountability, which means they said very little directly, but between the lines, it was all there. Serena graduated in May. She walked across that stage in the same gym where, 2 years earlier, she'd sat through a convocation where the university president talked about community and integrity and the Caldwell family. Mom was in the 3rd row. She'd taken the day off. First weekday she'd taken off in 4 years. She had her phone out, and she took approximately 900 photos, and she was crying before Serena even got to the stage. I was next to her. I'm not a person who cries easily. I've been in situations where the people around me were crying, and I was the one holding it together, and after a while, that becomes habit, becomes identity, becomes just how you're wired. But when I saw my sister walk across that stage, straight back, chin up, the same walk she'd had since she was 12 years old and decided she was going to do things her way, I had to look at the ceiling for a second. She's starting law school in the fall. She told me her focus is going to be Title IX litigation. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to be in that particular room for the rest of her career. She said, "I'm sure." My brother came down for the graduation. He drove the gray sedan, wore a jacket and no tie, shook my hand, and then Serena's hand, and then stood next to Mom while she showed him all 900 photos. He was quiet and easy and generous with his time, the way he always is when he's not working, which makes it easy to forget what he actually does. At dinner afterward, a steakhouse on the edge of town, Mom's choice, he and I stepped outside while the food was coming. He had a glass of iced tea. I had a beer. The parking lot was warm and the sun was getting low. Thank you, I said. He looked at the parking lot. You called me. That was the right move. I mean, for everything after that. He nodded once, slowly. That's what family is for. We stood there for a minute. Cars passed on the road beyond the lot. Greer applied for that security job with Whitmore's office, I said. He was trying to protect his future. Most people who do wrong things are trying to protect something, my brother said. That doesn't make it smaller. It just makes it more ordinary. I thought about that. About how often terrible things come from ordinary calculations, from someone deciding that their convenience is worth more than someone else's dignity, from someone deciding that the girl who got hurt was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be believed. She said she ran it back, I told him, for months, wondering what she could have done differently. He looked at me. And now she's looking forward. He nodded again, finished his iced tea. That's the only direction that matters, he said. We went back inside. The stakes had arrived. Mom was telling Serena about the time, 20 years ago, when Serena had announced at age 6 that she was going to be a lawyer because lawyers got to talk in front of people, and she liked talking in front of people. Serena was laughing and denying it. Mom was insisting it was true. I sat down and picked up my fork. Outside, somewhere, an investigation was still moving at its own pace. The senator was clearing out an office he'd held for 12 years. 5 women were rebuilding what had been taken from them. A dean who thought institutional loyalty meant protecting the powerful was learning what 4 years of federal prison actually looks like. And my sister, the one who was supposed to make it out and did, and almost didn't, and did anyway, was laughing at a story from her childhood while her mother beamed at her from across a table. I don't have a lesson to offer. I don't know what to tell you to do if this happens to someone you love, because every situation is different and I got lucky in ways that most people don't. I had someone to call, and he knew people, and the system, for once, worked. What I can tell you is this. Go to the hospital. Not the one on campus. Go somewhere outside their reach. Get the kit done. Keep every document. Get a lawyer who doesn't owe anyone anything. And if you have someone you trust, really trust, call them at 11:30 at night and tell them everything. Leave nothing out. And if you're the person who gets that call, pick up. Sit down on the curb with her. Drive 30 minutes to the right hospital. Sit in the waiting room for 4 hours. Don't look at your phone. Just wait. That part, at least, is simple. I've thought a lot about the moment Officer Greer told Serena she might have misread the situation. Not because it surprises me anymore. I've been around long enough to know that's often the first move, but because of what it assumed. It assumed she had no one. It assumed that the version of events held by a senator's son, in a county where that name opened every door, was heavier than anything a scholarship girl from a working-class family could put on the other side of the scale. It assumed the calculus was already done. What Greer didn't calculate was that choices have weight that accumulates over time. His decision to protect his career instead of do his job didn't disappear when he left that interview room. It sat there and kept adding up. Every email Pickett sent to cover his own tracks added up. Every favor the senator called in added up. Not in some abstract, invisible way, in a very specific, documentable, federally prosecutable way. My brother didn't bring down that system through force or anger. He did it through patience and precision, by letting the weight of their own choices become the evidence against them. That's the part I keep coming back to. Garrett Whitmore wasn't undone by bad luck. Pickett didn't lose his career because the world is randomly fair sometimes. They were undone by the accumulation of what they'd actually done, and by the fact that there were people willing to document it carefully and stay in the room long enough to see it through. That's not fate. That's not luck. That's the result of deliberate choices made by people who decided the truth was worth the work it took to surface it. Serena made a choice the night she called me instead of going silent. She was scared, and she was hurt, and she had every reason to believe nothing would come of it. 2 prior complaints against Garrett had already disappeared into Pickett's office like they'd never existed. She had no guarantee that her case would go any differently. But she made the call anyway. That decision, that one act of refusing to accept that the system's first answer was its final answer, is what made everything else possible. Not my brother's connections. Not Forsyth's courtroom record. Serena's refusal to disappear quietly. I think about what it takes to do that when you're already hurt. To make the hard phone call when the easier thing would be to go home and lock the door and try to forget. It takes something that I don't have a clean word for, not quite courage, because courage sounds like you're not afraid, and she was terrified. It's more like deciding that your own account of what happened to you deserves to exist in the world, even when every voice of authority in the room is trying to convince you it doesn't. That's the thing I'd want anyone to take away from this. Not that you need a brother with the right contacts. Not that the system always works if you just trust it. It clearly doesn't, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But that refusing to let your own truth get buried is its own form of intelligence. It's its own form of strength. And it puts into motion things that the people who hurt you cannot fully control, no matter how many phone calls they make. Serena starts law school in the fall. She's going to spend her career in Title IX litigation. I asked her once if she was sure she wanted to live inside that particular fight every day for the rest of her working life. She said yes without hesitating. That's not someone who was broken by what happened. That's someone who took what happened and turned it into direction. I'm proud of her. I've always been proud of her, but now it's a different kind of proud.